give my talk in English, obviously. My Dutch is not good enough, but thank you very much for inviting me. So, there's a lot you can know about me. I think the main thing is that I guess I'm very well known as a blogger, speaking at Stanford, Mobile World Congress, and so on. And I guess I'm very much pro developer. I like to think about what we can do as developers. And the question I have to address is, why are there only 5 device manufacturers? If you drop Motorola, it's actually 4. And why not 55? Why not like you see in the PC industry? And what are we likely to see when Android and all these technologies come about? What does it mean for developers? Will open source make a difference? Why is this question important? Because where is the value for developers? The key is that the most common question a developer asks is that, how can I get my application on devices? And this, if we can answer this question, or if we can predict something very important about this topic, then I think we have all a winning proposition. Because clearly, if it's easier for us to get on devices, new applications, innovative applications, the better it is for innovation. Like a lot of my presentations, this is all about pushing the boundaries. So this is a little bit futuristic. It is designed to make you think. It's designed to push the envelope. It kind of talks about Android, and we have a video about Android later on, but it's not exclusively about Android. And if I have to distill my proposition in a single framework, then what I'm going to say is open source will lead to many new device manufacturers to enter the market space. New developments in the radio layer technology will also do the same. Many of these applications will be non-voice applications, specifically something like Amazon Kindle, which has got a network connection through an operator, or even the iPod Touch, where you can run an iPhone application on an iPod Touch. Therefore, what I'm trying to say is that we are going to be looking at a whole bunch of applications which are mobile, but they are not phones. And of course, in an economy where there is economies of scale at the moment for device manufacturers, if that economic model changes, then it's easier for new manufacturers to come up. And we're going to talk about why that is going to change. And of course, this will all lead to more innovation. So I think the way I can put it is about long-tail devices. That's the best way I can think about it, because it's a conceptual model. Why are we going to see lots and lots of new devices which we haven't seen before, and they're perhaps not manufactured in millions of units. This is the crux of it. Or I can say how to make 1,000 devices blue. This is another way to look at the same integration. Perhaps an interesting topic to talk about in Amsterdam, considering the tulips. I thought this is nice to choose this in a city of tulips. So, I've called this the ASUS effect. The ASUS, if you don't know about this, is a sub-notebook. It costs about $360 US. It runs on Linux, and it is extremely cheap and very, very effective. Point about it is that the whole value of the device has dropped because of open source. And what I'm trying to get to make you think is perhaps this same thing might happen to mobile devices, and you might see a whole bunch of different things. Now, what is the status quo? Now, that's a band called Status Quo. I put it out there because I like it. So, when we say status quo, is that what I'm trying to, what is the situation at the moment in the industry? What we see is sexy phones, beautiful phones. They look great. They're mostly being used for voice and SMS. No matter which way you look at it, no matter where in the world you look at it, that's what you see. In the current ecosystem, where voice and SMS are important, the operating system is not all that important. There is, let's face it, there's not a lot you can do with 160 characters. Voice is the predominant form of this thing, etc. And of course, in this ecosystem, what you see is that the economies of scale matters, which is why you get 5 device manufacturers and not 55, like the PC industry. Nokia, the world's biggest device manufacturer, is actually comparable to Walmart in a supply chain efficiency. So if you look at the supply chain industry, because I used to work for Oracle Corporation before, essentially, and I understand this completely different industry. When you look at it, supply chain industry, Nokia is very, very strong. And this is a core competency of Nokia at the moment. If the branding is important, the understanding of mobility is important, but the back end of it, it is all about a very, very efficient, hyper-efficient supply chain efficiency. And that, of course, explains why you have 5 and not 55. Why does this happen? And of course, in a fixed cost ecosystem, wherever you have an industry which has a high fixed cost, there your supply chain efficiencies matter. Therefore, at the moment, what I'm saying is that the fixed costs of making devices are very high, which will mean that you have a whole bunch of very few manufacturers who can do this very efficiently, and the supply chain efficiency is more important. And there are two catalysts which are going to change that. And the two catalysts are, firstly, catalyst is a chemical. Yes, you add to it and then it kind of it improves the chemical process. So that's the best starting point for catalyst. The two catalysts which are going to make an improvement, a difference, are firstly open source, and specifically Android, but not only Android, because everybody is now going down that route anyway. And the other is radio level announcements. Now I won't talk into these in great detail, but it's important to get you the concept. When you think of open source, you think of a geek. That's a geek, I can find out. And you think about it as somebody who's a ponytail guy sitting at night and then doing a Linux code. But it's a little bit more than that. If you consider things like WebKit, if you consider all these new products, the biggest contributors are actually companies. And this is the main difference for interoperability and so on. Therefore, essentially what we are getting to see is open source is almost becoming de facto nowadays. And if you look at the name of the game, what are we trying to achieve with open source here is to reduce the bill of material cost, which is the BOM, bill of material cost. And more importantly, the thing which I'm trying to get across to you is not only the hardware bill of material cost, but also the software. In other words, that you are combining hardware and software together, looking at software as components, trying to combine and mix and match these two things. Of course, open source is very well suited to do that, which is exactly why open source is such a big catalyst for reducing the bill of materials for a device. And this is, of course, making it very easy for new manufacturers to completely enter the game. Now, this is a slide about Android. I conducted a 2-day workshop in Hong Kong about Android, and that was not enough in my view. And I think, like I agree with Rudy there, that Android is a fundamental change, is a game changer completely. Because it has the capacity to do something very different. But from our point of view, what I'm trying to get to you, it has the capacity to introduce a whole bunch of device manufacturers who are currently not device manufacturers. Specifically, people like Cisco, who are very, very strong, but at the moment are not in this game at all. So you can bet that Cisco and people like that are looking at something like this to say that how can we enter this market? How can we be a competitor here? Because there is a lot of space at the moment. And of course, if you take away the supply chain issues, which is what I'm trying to get to, you have something interesting. Again, as Rudy pointed out, and a whole bunch of other people pointed out as well, it's not just Android. It's Symbian, Mozilla, Firefox, and so many others. So how do I see this? I see this as a little bit like Lego. And Lego, which combines software and hardware. So what we are trying to see here is that it is not just the software, but open source is modularized, so not just the hardware, but open source is modularizing also the software. As a result of that, you're finding a whole bunch of very different companies becoming very, very important. For example, Wind River, which is basically creates an optimized Linux kernel, and also helps in integration. Purple Labs does the same thing. Differentiation will now come from standardized components, because everybody deals with standardized components, and they will come from integration and services, which exactly is very good for us as developers. Because if you then mirror this to the PC market, that is exactly what has happened. Because in the PC market, you get standardized architecture, standardized software, standardized hardware, and how you combine it and what services you add on top of it make all the difference. But what about the radio layer? The radio layer is a very, very complex topic, and it's not something we can cover in great detail at the moment, but obviously it's a very big barrier to entry for new players. The problem with the radio layer is that there are about thousands of niche text cases to do, because to do a proper phone, you have to get FCC regulation, you have to get GCF regulation, approval. And that means you have to run all these different test cases and things like that, very expensive, not something very easy to do. How is that being fixed? There are two factors affecting that at the moment. The first one is a whole bunch of devices which are non-voice devices. The second one is putting many radios on one chip. Now when you look at non-voice devices, when I mean by non-voice devices, obviously non-voice devices also have a lot of testing to do, but less number of test cases, because you don't have the same problem as voice, you don't have as much as integrity to be doing this. And if you are thinking about non-voice devices, I'm using Kindle, which has a radio network, a cellular network. Radius, which is called HSTPA, which is just coming out at the moment. I think it's in beta at the moment, the second device in the middle. And the third one, of course, is the iPod Touch, which has got a Wi-Fi. And of course, the beauty of that is that an iPhone application will run on an iPod Touch service. And this means essentially the same example of what I'm talking about is suddenly your applications no longer have to run on a phone. They can run on the device like the iPod Touch, which is not a phone. And there are many more of those will come into the marketplace, which means that applications, to quote Rudy's discussion, will become like ringtones or something. Is that what you said? I think this is something very interesting quote I had, so I'm going to talk about that. So applications will, I'll quote you for it. Applications will become like ringtones, and I think this is very important because that has been so desperately lacking in the industry for the last 10 years. I've been following this. We have so many different things going on, but not the industry. Finally, what does it mean, this whole bunch of new chips on devices? There are a whole bunch of startups in the US, Funnel Networks, Big Wave, Module Mobile, Israeli startup. What they're trying to do is combine many chips on one chip. Where this makes a difference, of course, the reason why you have to do this is because you now have to support WiMAX networks and Wi-Fi networks and so on. But where it makes a difference is it reduces the integration costs. Once you have tested it once under some certification, then you no longer have to muck around with having to do this many times in many different geographies. Therefore, clearly what is happening is that is being shrunk, that component as well, which leads to my belief that we are going to see a whole bunch of new devices which we haven't seen at the moment at all. How do we compare this to the PC industry? The PC industry at the moment has about a 40% white box label. In other words, that about 40% of the devices are white label. In the mobile industry, 84% is made by the top 5. And clearly, this is what I see will be changing. If we expect to see that this will go away and will make a difference, then this is what I think will happen. And that is the key number for us to think about to get into this. So to conclude, what I'm trying to say, if I have to distill this proposition, yes, this is a nice conclusion, I thought, yeah. What I have to say about it essentially is that open source will lead to a whole bunch of new devices, which we haven't seen in the marketplace at the moment. Android is the best example of that. We're going to see a little bit of a video about that as well. There are new developments at the radio layer, specifically, which combine the chips, as well as a whole bunch of non-voice devices, which are coming out, makes a big difference. This will reduce the economies of scale model. In other words, you will see something like a long tail. Why is this important? Obviously, because this will mean a whole bunch of new devices, many places for us to look for applications, innovative applications, and so on. And now, to show you that this is not all theoretical, I have a little video here, and I hope I can be able to run this now because I'm not used to the Mac. But before we start, what I have to say to you about this is about Android. This is about Android, but it's not a very sexy video. The point about this is Android was released in November 5, 2007, and this video was produced in Mobile World Congress in February 2008. Therefore, what I'm trying to say is between the time of releasing of the software to the seeing of a device, you have a 3 or 4 month window. Of course, that is not a production device, but you can see the impact of what is here. Okay, so now we have to
Let's try it.
Let's try it. It just played 3 minutes, yeah.
Should be audio.
Okay,
my name is Michael Chu from E28. I'm the VP of Marketing. What we have done is we have ported Android onto this hardware platform that we've been selling in the last 6 months. So this is the existing hardware that we're actually running this Android. We can make GSM phone call, GPRS, Wi-Fi, and let me show you the functionality. So also we have a touchscreen. So as you can see, you can just scroll on the menu bar or the icon bar, and then let's say if I want to run the Google Map. So you launch it, and then you see, and as you can see with the touch screen, you can actually move it around and it updates very quickly of other location areas.
Can you zoom in?
Zoom in, double click, and it goes in. So you can see the update. So this is going through Wi-Fi live, real time.
Can you show like a hybrid map of some sort?
Yeah, it's part of the default. This is actually something that we just offload from the internet.
Okay.
And put onto it.
Gotcha.
We provide the Linux BSP for this hardware.
Okay.
So you access all the memory, the GSM stack, the Wi-Fi.
So it's really responsive, running existing hardware.
It's actually running on a 730, but the OMA 730.
Okay.
200 MIPS only, and it only has 64 meg flash, 64 meg RAM. So it's very limited in terms of resources, but it can actually quite responsive. If you look at
I can imagine running on current hardware or future hardware.
Oh, let me get that again. View satellite. So it refreshes with the satellite images. Okay, so again, so for example, if I press the dial, so it should show me the recent calls. And the information, during today we didn't make much information.
Do you find it really intuitive to use?
Pretty much. So if I quit that, let me go to, let me find the contact. Again, this is a demo, we actually don't have any entries, but what I can do is create a new entry, for example. So you can edit, put in different fields, and so on. You can actually dial direct from it. And one of the other things that we have done, on the internet, you can just download standard Android application and run this hardware.
Let's run it,
right? So the API demo, you can have a number of, let me just go into one of them. I think this one, everybody knows this. So this is running on real hardware.
Wow, that's not bad at all.
Considering it's a low-tier processor.
Yes.
Let's see, I want to run this one.
Okay, I think the point there to show you is that this is not a sexiest of devices. What I'm trying to show you is that it took about 4 months for a Chinese company to make this, from the release of the Android code, and what it will mean for the hundreds of people in China and Korea before they start actually creating these little devices is fabulous. To me, that is the brilliant potential of what we are going to see in front of us. It will all be wonderful applications. So thank you very much, and that is really the gist of my presentation. One final thing is we are going to release a lot of our books for free on ad funded model. So if you are interested, keep following my site. Hopefully this will be very interesting as well. Thank you very much. And Q&A, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ajit. Excellent. Q&A.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Do you agree that with the mobile Firefox, with the plugins capability that also can address the local services of the phone, like the camera and stuff, that the mobile Firefox will be one of the most interesting platforms to run on, since it will run on every other mobile device?
In general, yes, I agree with what you're saying. The problem there is not just the Firefox itself. The problem there is the security models behind it, because the code exists. Google Gears is doing the same thing, as you know, if you're following the space quite well. There are other people like OMDP also trying to do the same thing as well. The problem is that you have a security model which has to be done. So at a software browser level, it is possible, and I think this is the way to go. But in reality, there will be some more gaps to be filled up.
Hi.
Yes.
What are the two single most important insights that people overlook in the mobile space, according to you? Thanks.
Sorry, two single most
important insights.
Right. I thought I heard it correctly for the first time, but I was thinking how to answer this question in the quickest possible time. Okay, the single most important insight I think that people mistake with the mobile device is underestimating it and not realizing that we are at a very early stage in the industry, and this is going to grow much bigger. So I think perhaps the Dutch startup, which I perhaps didn't get all of it because it was in Dutch, but I think the fact that we are I believe going to be very at a very big area, and so I think that is my first insight. So that the future is bright. It's not orange, but it's bright. So that's my bit. The second thing I think is that I think there's just the fact that I think I would use this thing, the ringtones thing. Yes, the ringtones are the applications that become the ringtones. Applications are going to become far more important. We have seen that with iPhone. We will see that more. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
right at you.
I was just wondering, with all the possible profusion of new device developers, isn't there going to be something like the problem with the Java profiles, in that you have the same platform, but you don't necessarily have the same capabilities?
What we are talking about here is new device manufacturers. What was in Java was software that was implemented differently by different people. In other words, that different APIs of Java were implemented differently by different vendors. What I'm talking about here is whole bunches of new, think about it like white label PCs. That's what I'm talking about essentially. What I'm talking about is a whole bunch of people who are not in the industry at all trying to create phones. And yes, there will be some fragmentation, I agree. So, yeah. Yes? Sorry, yeah.
A white label PC is usually under your desk. A white labeled phone is in my jacket, and I'm going to take it out and say, oh, you've got a really cool white label phone, so what will happen there?
Right. So this is the question of brand. I think the fact that you have a white label phone doesn't mean it will be sold as a white label phone. If you look at the PC market today, almost exclusively everybody is manufacturing in Taiwan or China under a different brand. So all I'm trying to say essentially is that if you think about it, for example, I saw a phone about holographic. Have you seen Star Wars 1 where Princess Leia kind of comes up as an image? Yes. There's somebody who's done that as an interface on a phone. This is fascinating stuff. In other words, that the interface is this Leia-like. Well, it's supposed to be the other person, but it's that kind of holographic communication. How many devices will support that? How are you going to make this in the industry? This is a whole different question. I mean, social networks would love that. It's an avatar type scenario. But I think at least we have a chance to create something different. So even if you don't make millions of these devices, you might make hundreds of thousands, but you still have a business. At the moment, there is no business. At the moment, if you do something as radical and different as this, or if you think of smart card web server, which is essentially a whole web server on a single chip, on a SIM card, this actually not. It kind of, to deploy it, you need devices, and perhaps if you have a more demographic way of devices, then more innovation will come from place. Yeah. Yes. Two more questions. Yes.
If you look behind you, you see the red flag over there. Do you see it?
Red flag?
Yeah, that one. How do you think the Vodafone brand
right.
is
I thought
right now,
somebody raising the red,
for the main part, this brand and some others also are very important in our choices of mobile devices and mobile phones. So handset subsidies obviously are very important, and also a big difference from how distribution in PCs is going on. Can you reflect a little bit on how you see this related to open source and what those subsidies will do in that perspective?
Well, I think basically that the cost of the handset will come down. This is what I'm trying to get to. In other words, therefore, that the subsidy proportionally may not be as important a factor. I think that handset subsidies actually are a lock-in factor in many cases. So this is my personal view, but obviously most operators may not agree with this. But I think that the more you bring this more to the PC market, taking a Vodafone specifically, from what I heard in the UK, Vodafone actually has to do something innovative now, because in the UK we got one operator, O2 offering the iPhone. Vodafone doesn't have any equivalent proposition. Something's got to be done. So this is the good thing about all these changes, because things which people were never talking beyond voice and SMS. Today now suddenly they're saying, what do we do to overcome the iPhone? This is the question, and maybe they will think this way. Yes,
Okay.
You have a question?
Last question.
I'll say the question.
We have time for one last question.
One last question. Yes, back. Yep. I'm actually glad we have more questions here, because I thought this was going to be such a off the chart topic that it might be completely something.
Am I right that by opening up we could see like third world countries getting really heavily into this mobile market, because they are the ones that making new handhelds and new software and new applications. So being there as a producer, not just as a user.
Yes, of course. But more than third world countries, I think it's the usual suspects, specifically Chinese, Taiwanese, Korean companies, basically who are ODMs. This vendor I showed you, of course, I have no commercial relationship with any of the companies I've talked about. But the key there is that particular vendor is an ODM, i.e. they make sort of devices to be sold by other people. And of course, those people can now do more different things. So I think it's going to be the same people who make phones and make devices at the moment. But they are just capable of doing far more from what they do. And the critical thing from a buyer's point of view is you don't have to order millions of them. You might order hundreds of thousands to test something completely off the chart, like a holographic or a CWS, smart card, etc. And this might be useful. Therefore, it's a catalyst to the question.
Thank you again, Ajit.
Thank
Great
you.
talk.
Thanks.
Yes, Mark.